Okay, so testing. Hello, hello. Yes, all good? All right, cool. So right before I left last year, I taught some simple purification breath that we do before meditation practice, namely from the Tibetan tradition, but it's common to do pranayama and other breath work to help settle the mind in many traditions. So some of you, or all of you, have probably done something like it. It's not that difficult to do. So if you're in a chair, though, you'll want to sit more forward on your seat like this so that the pelvis can tilt forward. Usually when we're back in the chair, we get kind of rolled back. So if you're in a chair, come more forward, because there's a position we'll take in a minute where you're going to put your thumbs at the root of your ring fingers and then curl the fingers around the thumbs. So you're blocking, this is a channel, this so that the ring finger is there's a channel there where kind of like toxic energy can come in. So if you can, you're going to straighten your arms. Not everybody can do that, depends on the length of your torso and your arms. But you work towards straight while you're pressing the back of your hands at the crease of the hips. Like that, and let the shoulders come up around your ears. Yeah. So if you can't straighten, that's fine. Just keep your elbows a little bent. Or some people like to glide the hands down the back, down the thighs. In either case, floor or seat, make sure you can sit up nice and straight. If you can take lotus, take lotus. Yes, this will tax your wrists, but it's temporary. Don't worry, we won't be there long. But first, let's start with the hands on the knees. Inhale, just follow along with me. Reaching up, and then exhale, make your Vajra fists, this position I just showed you, with the thumbs at the root of the fingers. Then straighten the arms as much as possible. Sit up nice and tall. Inhale. Your left arm comes up, you make one circle with the wrist, press it along the left nostril, breathe out through the right, purifying the right channel. Breathing from the belly. Then release the wrist down, back to the hip. Inhale, now the right arm. Up, one circle, and then place it on the nose. Exhale. The elbows parallel with the floor, good. Release the hand down. As you inhale, you can imagine that you're breathing in the purified 5 elements as rainbow light into the body. Then exhale, any toxic energy moving out of the right nostril, emptying, purifying the right channel. Release down. Inhale, right again. Rainbow light filling the body. Exhale. Purifying the left channel. One more time, both sides. Inhale. Exhale. Completely clear. Left channel, inhaling the right arm up, breathing in rainbow light. Exhale, purifying the left channel. Release the hand down, keep both hands at the hips. Inhale nice and tall, big long in-breath. And you're going to exhale a 3-part exhalation. You can try again just for practice. So this middle, for the Shushumna, purifying the central channel, you're inhaling through the nose, and then a 3-part exhalation. Yeah, good. And then release the hands and rest in what's called the wisdom prana, the afterglow, purifying the 3 main central channels. These are called the 9 purification breaths, and now we'll just ease right into meditation, making sure you're in a comfortable seat. Most important first ingredient is relaxation. So make sure you're in a comfortable position so you can relax, enjoy, free of strain. Let the out-breath melt the tension away from the muscles, away from the bones, melting down, down into the earth beneath you. Let the tongue rest against the upper palate at the root of the front top 2 teeth. Relax the jaw, the muscles of the face. And either the eyes are closed or slightly open, gazing at a comfortable angle towards the floor. Feel the back nice and straight, the muscles around the shoulders and the neck relaxed, the shoulder blades down the back. The chest is slightly buoyant. The chin gently drawn towards the center of the throat, lengthening the back of the neck. The belly is soft and receptive to the breath. The hips and legs relaxed. The hands either palms down on your thighs or resting in your lap. Settling the body in its natural state, free of tension, still like a mountain. Resist the urge to fidget or itch or move. See how still you can rest and settle the body in its natural state, at ease within itself. And allow the breath to settle in its natural state, a natural flow of in and out breath, unforced, uncontrived, no more pranayama. No more controlling, just let it flow in and out. And then settle the mind in its natural state, not its habitual state. Habitual state is to be thinking and turning around and around in samsara, tumbling thoughts one on top of the other. The natural state, on the other hand, is calm, clear, limpid. Quiescent. Like a calm, clear mountain lake. All the soot is settled to the base of the lake, and the water of the mind is clear and calm. The mind is also like space, permeates our body and feelings and sensations but it's also unbound, unlimited by the confines of the body. Feel that quality of spaciousness of mind, within which thoughts, feelings, sensations Bringing that aspect of yourself home to the heart space like you would bring a young child into your arms. And breathe out soothing, loving acceptance and healing. Stay with the breath. Stay with the feelings in the body. And feel your body filled with that luminosity generated at the heart space, your body of light. And now shifting and imagining, now having worked the Tonglen with ourselves for a while, it can be nice to shift towards somebody in your life towards whom you would like to cultivate more compassion, or towards someone who may need more prayer or compassion. It comes naturally for you. Suffering with each breath. Like you, they wish to be free of suffering. Breathing that in, transform it into your heart, breathe out. Ready. Stay with the breath. Don't get lost in thought. Just feel that openness and the willingness. Breathe in suffering, that immutable and destructible nature of your own mind. And breathe out life. Offer that. resistance, it's not a solid thing, it's not a wall, it's just a feeling. Notice maybe the resistance hasn't gotten you very far in the past, so try something new. Breathing in, breathing out. Last few moments, see them in their full flourishing, spontaneous arising, their true luminosity shining through, unhindered, unbound, unsullied, unclouded by anything that isn't them, their true self. See them in full, genuine happiness. Wish that for them, may it be so. Likewise, as we wish for happiness and freedom from suffering, as to our friends and family, all beings near and far, also like us, wish to be happy and free from suffering. So extend that wish, that heartfelt wish, to all beings around the world. And I'll offer a prayer of the four immeasurables as a closing. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings know supreme joy, which is free of suffering. May all beings feel, experience equanimity, which is free of attachment to some and aversion towards others. observations, requests, rebuttals?
Requests including heat. Are people okay with the temperature?
Yeah,
turn the-
oh, yeah, good. If we turn the heat on, there's going to be a loud
It's
sound.
really low.
That's the bathroom? It's a lot louder than that. That must be the bathroom.
That's the water filter.
That's the water filter. Anything else about practice? Yeah.
Setting the four measurables, is that a big part of your practice?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the four measurables are common Buddhist contemplation, as you know. Yeah. In the category of cultivating bodhicitta. And so the four measurables are love, or loving kindness, which is metta, or maitri in Sanskrit. Metta is Pali, yeah? And that is the cultivating the care and love and feeling of goodwill towards others and oneself. And then the next is compassion, which is karuna. And so if you look at the prayer that I recited, it kind of elucidates that. So the first one is, may all beings be happy and have the source or the cause of happiness, which we will talk about in a moment. It's this chapter of the book. And then the second is, may they be free of suffering and the cause. Some translations say cause, or some say causes of suffering. I guess it depends on how you cut it. Is there one cause? Are there many causes? I think you could say both. And that is the compassion, that's karuna. So not only do you feel love and care for another, but you also long to help and either pray or enact compassion for the benefit of others. And may you want them to be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. And then the third is
Sympathetic joy.
Sympathetic joy, good. Sympathetic joy, which is mudita. Mudita in both Sanskrit and Pali. Karuna is the same in Sanskrit and Pali. Pali is the earlier Buddhist language. Sanskrit was a later, more kind of complex developed language, and it's more associated with Tantra, the arising of Tantra in India. And so mudita is fabulous. It's one of my favorites. It's really cultivating the capacity to rejoice in the good fortune of others as well as ourselves. So often when we see somebody have more than we do, or win awards, or be better off, or find the perfect love, we can feel competitive or jealous. So it's counteracting that competitive, self-centered streak that we all have, and helping us contemplate and find capacities within ourselves to actually have a sense of joy in the good fortune of others. So the third line is, may all beings have that experience of supreme joy, not just pleasure, the craving that's through just mundane senses, but this profound sense of joy, an upwelling of joy, and it's free of suffering. The supreme joy, which is our true nature too, but in the way that we cultivate it is this contemplation of rejoicing in the good fortune of others. It's very interesting. It's a good thing to test yourself on. Can you do that? Like if you feel the jealousy or competitiveness come in, backpedal and go, wait a minute, this is an opportunity to cultivate joy. Joy in the good fortune of others. And ourselves too. Let's be joyful of our good fortune. Don't forget that. And then the fourth is equanimity. Equanimity. And that is reflected in the fourth line of the prayer. May all beings have equanimity, or rest in equanimity, which is free of essentially attachment and aversion. So attaching onto the things we want, the people we want, and the aversion towards things we don't want. Equanimity, it's not a bland kind of one. Another term for it in Tantra is one taste. Cultivating the capacity to have one taste, but it's not that everything in the world or everything that we eat or see or touch or feel is bland and tastes the same. But it's the way that we respond to the variety of experiences. And not in a bland way, but actually in a way that has equanimity and less reactivity towards, again, the things we want and the things we don't want. And in the past years when I've been teaching here, we've been cultivating those capacities to be a spiritual warrior. I don't mind that phrase, but it's a being who's got courage and finds equanimity in the face of adversity and transforms adversity onto the path. So equanimity is a very important one. It's interesting in the Tibetan tradition, in those four immeasurables, they practice equanimity first, because they say if you don't have equanimity, all the others will just be kind of less authentic. Whereas the traditional ways to do love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. I think there are good arguments for both. You could even practice the second first or the third first and see what that feels like. Yeah, thank you for asking. Any questions or comments about that? Yeah.
I guess I have just another question.
Yeah.
The Tonglen that you had us
Yeah.
practice,
Uh-huh.
that somehow always gets to me. I don't practice it that often, but always, it's one of the more powerful ones.
Mm.
So I don't know if that's why I forget to practice it more often.
Yeah, maybe you don't need it.
But I was wondering if you can speak a little bit to that one and sort of...
Yeah. There are many different varieties. The question was about Tonglen, and that this particular guided Tonglen that I do touches you, and you're wondering why, or you want to know more about it. So this one is, I have learned Tonglen from a few different teachers over the years of my study. Alan Wallace guides one much like this. You can find them in his books and in his recordings. He's a wonderful teacher scholar who's been a teacher and a big influence on both Eve and I, Eve Ekman, who teaches this class too. And also Pema Chodron, who's very well known and written many great books, and she teaches Tonglen. That's what she's known for, and I like her approach. I had the good fortune to receive teachings from her in an afternoon at Taramandala a few years ago, and I asked her, people were asking questions. She didn't want to give a talk, so she said, "I'll come and I'll just answer Q&A." And people were asking good questions, but they were very heady questions, and I was like, here we have the Tonglen goddess here, I want to hear it from her. I hadn't studied with her before. She's very old now, she's over 80. She doesn't travel much. And so it was a rare opportunity. So I stood up and I asked, can you guide us in a Tonglen practice? It's one thing to talk about it, but it's another thing to feel it. And so she did, and she took us right in. And so it really affected me. She didn't have a lot of preamble. She didn't try to explain why we can do this or why it's safe, or, because people freak out, like, oh, if I'm breathing in the negativity of the world, it's going to overpower me, or But it was so, I think through her years of experience of just, her capacity was infectious, right? So she just took us right in and just started with the breath, with this light at the heart. And she didn't even talk about the light at the heart. That's more of an Alan thing. Alan does that a lot. I feel it's useful. But she just said, breathe it in, breathe it out. And then she did something that was really cool. Right away she said, imagine you're up on the moon looking down at the earth. And with the in-breath, breathe in the suffering of the whole world. This was the last step. Transform it at the heart and then breathe out. So from that vantage point, it was very powerful. And I liked her directness with that. Sometimes I'll do that, but there are many different ways to do it. Yeah. And so those are my main influences, and that's what works for me. But really the most important thing is to feel it, right? So really do whatever works for you, and don't think, you don't have to do a bunch of prep, just drop right in and start breathing directly in and out of the heart. Often that's just a good step there, because we don't do that very often. It's like it's dark, unknown, unlived in space sometimes, So the light is helpful. Kindle the light with the breath. Kindle that. Grow that capacity in you. And stabilize that in you. Because that's the truth. We have that. We don't kindle it. Anyone else? Maybe one more? Yeah.
So on the topic of the four measurables,
Yeah.
in my experience with teachers, we're all fan of Western Buddhism broadly,
Right.
like through Metta and Tonglen and Shamatha and Vipassana.
Uh-huh.
I feel like in those practices, loving kindness is often emphasized, and compassion is often emphasized, and equanimity is often emphasized, but joy seems to get short shrift. And I was
Wow.
wondering,
Yeah.
if you
Why?
think sure why that would be the case, and B, if there are meditative practices or ways to frame those practices I just mentioned to more directly cultivate and feel joy.
Yeah. Yeah, really it's using the mind to heal the mind, right? So these are contemplative practices where we're using thought to, in a sense, to reprogram thought. So we're not fighting fire with fire, but it's kind of like that, right? So there are beautiful, and I can bring some of the ones that I have in my practice manuals and texts, and I can guide you through those as we unfold these teachings over the next few weeks. But essentially what you do is you really imagine real life scenarios, like of somebody in your life who just has some good things happening, and just with the breath you can imagine, just breathing in and out and enhancing the good, enhancing that feeling of rejoicing. I'm so happy for them, isn't it great? I'm rejoicing in the fact that they finally got the job they wanted, and it's that alchemical counterbalancing any sense of separation or me versus them, or like I didn't get that kind of self-fixation that we have. And so really, that one really feels like more of like on-the-go practice. Like you do it on your cushion to train up in it, but that's one that you really get to integrate into your daily life a lot because of all the opportunities we get to be jealous in this world. It really counteracts jealousy. And I don't know why the teachers are giving it short shrift. For me, it was really one of the most powerful cathartic ones, because I don't know, I felt love and compassion came to me naturally, but jealousy, I don't know if it's being a woman or what, but we tend, in high school and growing up, women tend to be really jealous of each other. I don't know if men have that problem, but I don't know if I'm totally being too gendered or what, but I definitely felt that was one I had to chew on and work with. Competitive, I'm not like them, I don't have that, she's, it's just such a dumb way to be, it's such a sad way to be. And this one really offers us so many opportunities to bring joy into our life, to be happy, because there's a lot of good out there to rejoice in. There's also a lot of sadness and suffering to breathe in. That's more for Tonglen. That's the compassion one. So with Tonglen, we're working with the second one, Karuna. That's when you're feeling your heart breaking and bleeding. Metta is good for that too. Equanimity is good for that too. Yeah. Okay, so we're on chapter 3 of this very sweet book, Beyond Religion. And we're plugging through this, and Eve will pick up next week. I won't be here next week. And so this week we're on chapter 3, The Quest for Happiness. And so I wanted to just lay out some ideas and then get your thoughts on it. So, like we talked about last week, this basic premise, and you'll hear the Dalai Lama say it all the time, all beings want happiness and they don't want suffering, and that's what really unites us as human beings, our common humanity. And because of that, he's positing that this is our way to feel connected with others and not separate. That we all share that, no matter how evil somebody might be or how confused or hurtful somebody might be, we can recognize and have a sense of humanity or shared humanity with them, because we recognize, like me, they want to be happy and they don't want to suffer. They might not know how to do that. But that is true. And then there's what the Dalai Lama is positing is that this shared humanity can bring about a feeling of care, connection, and compassion for others, no matter who they are. So a compassion for them, not a compassion for the being, but not the behavior, so to speak, right? So we can always connect with the being. Even Trump, I can feel compassion for him as a being. It doesn't mean I have to abide or, roll over and play dead with the behavior of somebody who's doing wrong. You see? So in chapter 3, the Dalai Lama goes more deeply into, well, what is happiness, right? If he's saying we all want happiness, well, what is it? Let's define it. And from a secular perspective, everyday sense of what it is to be happy and have joy, it's not a religious thing. You don't have to explain it in religious terms at all, in terms of like an ultimate happiness, but really just what is this kind of common everyday quality of happiness? How can we define that? And then he goes on to say, well, in order to do that, we should also explore what the source or sources of happiness are as a way to get to know and tease out this quality of happiness or joy. And he posits that there are 3 main sources of happiness. I'm sure there are many more, but it's a nice summary. The 3 factors that contribute to our happiness is wealth, health, and friendship. Wealth, health, and friendship. So wealth in terms of having enough material support in order to live with dignity. He's not saying that we have to be wealthy or rich in order to be happy, but a certain degree of material comfort helps us to feel dignity in our life. Health as well. If we're not healthy, it's hard to feel happy. Now that doesn't mean that some people are unhealthy and are always miserable. Of course, there are many people in the world, maybe we know them, who have immense suffering or illness, but they have a happy disposition. So it's not correlate necessarily that if you don't have health that you're not happy. But certainly good health helps. It's nice when we feel good. And then friendship, connection, meaningful relationships contributes to happiness. So all of these 3, they contribute. The Dalai Lama is saying they are sources of happiness. So, but of course, let's look more closely at wealth. There's a Tibetan term that is kunga dundup, which is funny because it's kind of like sounds like somebody's name, kunga dundup. Kunga means all good, dundup means fulfillment or wishes, having your wishes, having your meaning. So kunga dundup means that which makes us happy and fulfills all of our wishes. And there's a joke. They say that money is kunga dundup. But if you get too fixated on it, it can also be a curse. And what he's pointing out is that to a certain extent, having wealth and comfort is very important. But if you acquire too much or fixate too much on kunga dundup, then we can become filled with stress and anxiety and distrust, right? And I think we see this. It's all over the place. We see it in our life. We see it in our myths. We see it in our movies. We see the king is totally filled with stress and anxiety and can never rest because he's always worried about maintaining his wealth and his power. So it's a common myth. Of course, this is not new to us. Also, having too much wealth can cause what's called in Tibetan, they call asar tsapo, is a funny term. It's an interesting term. Asar, sar means new, tsapo means hot. So it can cause a quality of being where you're fickle. You're always going for what's new and you're never at ease in yourself. And I think we can see that with people who have a lot of money or a lot of material wealth. There can be a quality of dissatisfaction or a dis-ease. And so wealth, while it can be a blessing, can also be a curse. And that's his main point. And so what he's saying is wealth, it can bring also loneliness and a feeling of being in a cocoon. And it can cause us, it can give us a certain degree of happiness. But what he's trying to get at here is that wealth, and like the following two that we'll talk about, in and of itself isn't what gives us happiness. What gives us happiness and a feeling of meaning and a mental wealth is something that comes from within. It's a wealth of love and compassion and connection. That outer wealth can help, but if it gets too excessive, it can be more depleting. And so he's saying that the mental wealth based on love and compassion, that's what brings lasting happiness. So it's pretty intuitive. He makes the point of like a poor family can be perfectly happy because they have trust and care and kindness between them, whereas a wealthy family may be totally miserable because they may live in luxury, but they may be suspicious and anxious and untrusting. So now he's introducing this idea of genuine happiness. So what is genuine happiness? And I'll read from page 34 of chapter 3. He says, recent social science research has shown not only that the mental benefits of wealth are temporary, but also that the general level of contentment in a society is higher when wealth is more evenly distributed among the population than when there are large disparities between rich and poor. So I just feel like that's so timely. I mean, our culture, our society is it'll be interesting to see what happens. This again suggests that well-being cannot be measured in objective material terms, but is dependent on a range of contextual factors which affect one's mental attitude toward or relationship to that wealth. So, how do we relate to all of this around us, whether it's poverty or wealth? How do we relate to it? Of course, there are certain circumstances that we need to have a basic humanity, a basic flourishing, but then above and beyond that, how do we relate to it? And so now looking at health, yes, health is definitely a source of happiness. When we're in pain, it's hard to feel positive about our life. A health both in body and mind. It's important not to forget the mind. Maybe we focus a lot on the body, but mental health, of course, is very important. Sometimes we can have a healthy body but a miserable mind. Sometimes we can have a miserable body and a happy mind. So it's not always a correlate. But he keeps pushing us to look, what is the real source of happiness? And he keeps trying to draw us back to the mind and our relationship to phenomenon, whether it's health or illness, wealth or poverty. What is the mental relationship? What is our outlook? And again, he's pointing to really the mental health is to feel a sense of connection, interrelatedness and care and concern for others as well as ourselves. So he's pointing back to the mental dimension here. And then lastly, the third one, friendship. We are social animals. So it's important to have friends and people we love around us, to feel, to receive care and to offer care. Friendship is based on trust and affection, not a superficial level, but on a more deep mutual sense of concern and respect. If we don't have love and trust, then we feel isolated, we feel alone. And so I want to share a sweet quote. I mean, all of this seems so common sense, but he's moving towards something that's simple and direct, but also quite profound. And on page 36, he says, during a visit to Spain many years ago, I met a Christian monk who had spent 5 years living as a hermit behind his monastery. I asked him what he had been doing all that time. He replied that he had been meditating on love. When he said this, in English even more broken than mine, I saw such a depth of feeling in his eyes that there was no need for him to say any more. Here we have an example of someone who lived alone but felt no loneliness. It is warm-heartedness or compassion, above all, which connects us to others. People who appear to have many friends and admirers may nevertheless feel quite isolated. I would remind such people that the only antidote to such loneliness is their own inner attitude of affection, concern, and warm-heartedness toward their fellow human beings. So, again, yes, it's important to have connection and friendships, but on a deeper level, we can't put all of our trust or hope in that. Because friends and loved ones, they might not be here forever. They might let us down. We never know what's going to happen in the outer circumstances. So how do we cultivate an inner capacity to find the inner source of friendship and love within, but of course while enjoying our relationships and the people around us? And a concern, he's saying, a warm-heartedness towards all of our fellow human beings. So, he goes on now to talk about 2 levels of satisfaction. So I'd just like to lay this out and then we'll break into dyads and have some discussion. So when we talk about happiness, what he's saying is that we can often conflate 2 different levels of happiness or satisfaction, and this is interesting. The first level is more of a surface level, right? So satisfaction coming from pleasurable feelings that come through stimuli. They come through our senses, wealth, health, and friendship, like he's just laid out. They all contribute to a sense of pleasure and contentment in our life, and satisfaction. But on a deeper level, the satisfaction isn't derived from the external stimuli. This is the meditative thing. This is what we're getting at when we go inside to meditate as well. But he's trying to stay kind of like non-religious and secular, so it's fun to watch how he does that. And so he's saying that on this deeper level of satisfaction, it's not derived from what's coming in from the outside, but from our own inner mental state of being. And he's saying this inner level is what he calls genuine happiness. Now, Alan Wallace wrote a book called Genuine Happiness, and I highly recommend it. And he goes deep into the 4 immeasurables as well in that book. So genuine happiness is a phrase, a concept, a journey that the Dalai Lama has been exploring for a long time. So the first level is interesting. It's not that we're supposed to be monastic in denial of that. And that's not what the Dalai Lama is saying. But he's saying it's important for us to recognize that this first level is transitory. That we can't rely on that to bring us the deeper, fuller satisfaction that our soul aches for. But we might not know that this transitory world isn't what's going to give it to us. So we're confused and we go around circles. Whereas this second level, the inner level of satisfaction, what's the source of that? Genuine happiness requires, he's saying, a balanced peace of mind and mental composure. And this makes me think of the Lojong slogans we spent so much time with before I left. Those slogans, and he's going to lace them out at the end of the book, are one way for us to cultivate this kind of even keel, wisdom, courage, compassion, where we contemplate things and we mature ourselves as human beings, and so that we cultivate mental stability and inner peace, right? We wise up in a way. We mature. We're less reactive. Drive all blames into one. Stop blaming everybody else out there, but we realize our own self-grasping. No, not our partner. Our own self-grasping is what causes so much suffering and chaos in our life. So those types of slogans, think about them, chew on them. That's one way. Contemplation, koans, writing, journaling, exploring in so many different ways can help us develop this inner peace, this capacity for that. And I'll read from 38. Page 38. The role of our minds in determining our happiness can be easily illustrated. Imagine two people diagnosed with the same terminal illness. Say an advanced form of untreatable cancer, for example. One of them responds to this news with anger and self-pity, obsessively focusing on the unfairness of the situation, while the other responds with calm acceptance. In both cases, the material condition, in terms of physical health and suffering, is the same. But the first person incurs additional psychological and emotional pain, while the person with a calm mind is better equipped to carry on with life and continue to experience the things that bring joy. Family, perhaps, or dedication to certain causes, or reading. The only difference between the two is in their state of mind. I want to keep going. With inner resilience, it is possible, even in extremely aggravating circumstances, to maintain a degree of happiness. And yet, without this inner strength, no amount of sensual gratification can ever make us happy. But if peace of mind is our first defense against hardship and suffering, there are also other crucial factors which greatly contribute to our level of genuine happiness and joy. Recent scientific research suggests that chief among these are a sense of purpose which transcends narrow self-interest and a feeling of being connected with others or of belonging to a community. The root of both of these, I believe, is compassion or warm-heartedness, and it is to this that I now turn. So then he has a couple chapters on compassion. So, I think I've talked enough, kind of laid out some ideas from the book. Now I'd like to hear from you. Yes?
Yeah, I was very curious about two things.
Yeah.
One was the connection between how health was separated from friendship, but the idea of mental connection seems to be important in healthiness. So it seemed to bring friendship closer to being healthy, like being healthy requires friendship in a way. And then the second point was about the relationship between human-to-human connection and the connection between humans and non-human animals or nature. Like, could it
yeah.
be the case that
Yeah.
like, someone wasn't really lonely because they experienced a lot of connection
Yes.
with non-human animals or trees,
Yes.
and that was a way of forming a friendship for them? Or does the account that he's giving require the human-to-human connection and the element of health that requires where friendship happens? Does that make sense?
The last sentence does the
Yeah.
idea of health.
Because it seems like, so he says we have wealth, health, and friendship.
Right.
And these contribute to happiness. And it looks like then that health and friendship are separable. But when he defines health, he makes a distinction between bodily health and mental health.
Yeah.
And he says mental health is just as important as bodily health.
Mm-hmm.
But mental health is then defined partly in terms of connections to something external to the body. One of those things would be contact with other creatures.
Right.
So it seems to bring friendship closer to to health.
Mm-hmm.
That, for example, wealth seems really separable from health, but being healthy in the mental realm seems to essentially require friendship on the definition he's giving. And then
Yeah.
it seems like, well, if someone was lonely because they didn't have human-to-human contact, they might still get something very profound because they could form friendships with non-human animals or nature.
Yeah. He goes into that even more in the coming chapters around how by nature as mammals, we are born from mothers and we are reliant on that kind of love and care because we're so underdeveloped when we're born that in a way we're kind of entrained to need that connection and that human care and love and compassion, maybe more than a butterfly or a frog or turtles who just lay eggs and then leave. So, and then he cites all sorts of studies of monkeys, for example, who have been taken away from their mothers early. They show a lot more expressions of aggression and anger than the monkeys who aren't. So it's definitely, it's true that he's connecting friendship or connection and care and touch with health, both mental and physical, I'm sure. It makes sense. I mean, we know scientifically we thrive when we have that kind of connection. And I think that you could say that, yes, that all three of them maybe have that both physical and mental, physical and mental, physical and mental correlate and need to be interrelated. And in a way, it's arbitrary to separate these things all out, but he's trying to point to what are these more outer, superficial level things that are the sources of our, you can say mundane, but I don't want to be derogatory about it, but our everyday happiness. But what he keeps trying to do is drop down and say all of those are external circumstances that we can't place all of our hope in, that we have to always turn in and say, how am I cultivating my mental health, my inner resources, to feel wealthy even if I don't have $10 in the bank, to feel healthy even if I might have cancer, to feel friendship even if I'm alone in a monastery meditating by myself. But I don't know if that answered exactly what you were pointing out, but I appreciate your points too. Thank you. Anyone else? What do you think about? Can you appreciate what he's trying to get to? He's trying to, in a non-religious, secular way, and of course we're using secular as appreciating all religions, all traditions, whereas we're not saying it has to be totally free of religion, but he's trying to be free of religion. Too much jargon in his approach here so that this can be thought about in many different circles and areas that normally might not be open to Buddhism. But I think we're all here because we sense that Buddhism has a beautiful quality of essential truth to it that is translatable no matter who we are, whether religious or not, atheist or not. So he's pointing to the importance of cultivating this inner capacity within us and fortitude, which is so interesting because, the Tibetans have, just take out of the picture for a moment the Cultural Revolution and the Chinese invasion and basic genocide of Tibetan culture. Just take that out. Before then, it was hard to live up there. It's the rooftop of the world, the land of snows. High altitude, not a lot of vegetables, not a lot of variety there. Tsampa was the thing, the roasted barley flour mixed with yak butter and salt, and not a lot going on. Animal, eating all parts of the animals, cold. These people are tough, and experience suffering at their fingertips, even just in terms of the environmental challenges that they have. It was a feudalistic society as well. It was no Shangri-La. And so I see, and materially we are more comfortable in these days and day and age. Maybe we wouldn't have come up with these teachings now, because things are too easy for us. But I think we can't throw away these sometimes arcane teachings of Buddhism in terms of lojong and transforming adversity onto the path, because maybe we've lost our edge with that. We're a little like, what is it, Wall-E land? Like we're all just getting a little flaccid and life's too easy, so we're kind of, There's something about experiencing environmental extremes of hot and cold that we don't experience so much because we have air con and heaters. We also don't go without food like we used to. The body actually does better when it experiences some extremes. It keeps us stronger. There's scientific studies that show that. But so this is pointing us back, in a way, inviting us back to for us, I think what our challenge is the inner charnel ground, right? The domain of the mind is really our own area for challenges. And this is our land of snows, is in here and in here. So I'm trying to tie this together.
I read this book a couple years ago, and there's parts of it that I loved and parts of it that really irritated me. Which is interesting because I never expected to be irritated by the Dalai Lama.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. But I do think that, I could just keep thinking of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And yes, it's a Western concept, but I think that I think it's really important for Buddhism or non-Buddhism, but secular mindfulness, because I've been trained to teach secular mindfulness to teenagers, to not bypass, what does it mean for someone we'll just say in a Western culture, to not have the basic bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like to not feel safe in their home, to maybe not have a stable home, to maybe not have a home, to maybe not actually, like they're not doing intermittent fasting. They really don't know when family is gonna be able to eat something other than,
Right.
you know, I don't know what's super cheap. Cheerios. Ramen, thank you, ramen. Yeah. And so like, I think that this one particular show, I was really appreciative because you don't expect the Dalai Lama to say like, wealth makes people happy. I get it, it's on one particular level.
Right.
But I don't know that you can get down below to that other level, to genuine happiness. If you don't, like if your nervous system isn't fucking working, if you're in fight, flight, freeze, you know, sort of scientifically, which is why it's fun to love science so much. You know, I just like, I dig that about him. But the nervous system can't let go.
Yeah.
It like, we are a mammal. I mean, no matter what.
But would you say that that the people you're talking about who may not have a home, you know, there's people in our day and age who don't have a home, who don't have 3 meals a day. But the same thing was happening in Tibet too. I mean, there's poverty and suffering, and there was a way, I'm not trying to put them on a pedestal, but there's a way, and of course we don't want to profit from it or take advantage of that type of attitude to say, oh, let them just be poor, because they can transform their adversity.
Didn't exist. The disparities here are so profound that I think in some ways they're more traumatic. I mean, I don't know what the disparities there were like. In some instances, they were very bad. And there was not a lot of social justice. You know, it's very classist. It was a feudal society on some level. I'm guessing it was a much more deeply communal society.
That's what they
So
had.
one of the things that we have, what's eroded for many people in this country, at least the students that I work with, is there's not a social fabric of communal support, of like kindness to land into, a system, a network of like, okay, yeah, you might not have a stable place to live, but there's like all these people you're connected to that are holding space for you, that are, and I think I mean, I don't know, I think neuroscience, I just don't ever want to use this practice to bypass, to be like, oh, if everyone just sat and meditated or just focused on gratitude or cultivating compassion for themselves, then there's something, my concern is that like, if you can't get to that place, then there's something wrong with you.
Right. Absolutely.
And
I don't think that's...
Fair enough, right? Like I'm super privileged. I live a super privileged life. And so I think the issue is here. Right? And I can get to that issue because my basic needs are met. I have a very safe place to live. I have all the food I need. I have way too many clothes. You know, I have loving friends, a loving wife. Like my Maslow's hierarchy is like in solid. So then I get to work with my mature brain. So I do actually appreciate, like I was surprised when I read this chapter when he said wealth, and I was like, Dalai Lama's talking about wealth? Like what? And then I sort of started to think about it, and I was like, yeah, it's really hard to go deep if you feel unsafe in the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, we can just look at the animal kingdom and see what they're like when they don't feel safe.
They're
not at rest.
Absolutely.
So, it's just like, I don't know, a little pontification I have to do.
Good.
Sorry.
I appreciate that. Thank you. That's important.
It feels that what you're pointing out, or whatever the book is pointing out, is that maybe there is maybe a curiosity to play with the edge of discomfort. And maybe I was interested in what you were saying about they did live an incredibly harsh life. There was just snow and yuck butter, right? It was like terrible. It was like on a mountain with nowhere to go, right? And yet there was an environment where they could face pain and sorrow and whatever it was, physical pain as well. So in a certain way, discomfort was fell on curiosity, if you wish, or it was like there was enough room. I mean, I feel that as soon as we are in a situation of being not at ease, we run from it. Instead of and that's where I think that's the difference is like And I completely agree with what you're saying. You know, if you are not, if you don't feel safe, you cannot explore how much pain you are. If you don't have the ground for welcoming that pain, you know, you can tell that sit, just look at it, blah blah blah. But you have to find a, you know, an environment where that can be explored safely. It's very true. But I'm talking about my experience, right? I have an extremely difficult idea to know what love is for me. Right? And you know, I can love my friend, everything is fine, and da da da. You know, the sunset, my dog, and blah blah blah. But then something goes wrong, you know, something gets triggered, and I have such a revulsion and rejection, and I hate myself for something that happens to me. And that's where I think that my discovery of love is, you know, trying to walk toward that rejection and revulsion that I had, and you know, and somehow being buried a little bit longer, you know. And that's where I found the most growth, if you wish, you know, trying to, you know, I start to love myself when I start to love the stuff that I hate about myself.
Yeah,
You know? And then I think it has to do with something that you said about, you know, it's difficult to live in those places, but maybe if we open up to it, maybe if we can see how does it feel, you know. I don't know. That was just an idea.
Yeah.
I was excited about that.
Yeah, the inner,
You mentioned that.
the inner charnel ground. That's really, I think, our work more, you know, those of us who are privileged enough to feel safe to go into those inner charnel grounds. Of course, if not, then we need to work towards getting help or helping those who need more of those basic dignity, like he's saying, around that. And absolutely, that's a huge part of this. And then to have the courage to go there and to befriend the shadow, you know, feeding your demons, October 16th, we will do that here. Come on October 16th and you'll experience a very interesting way to do that, to turn towards rather than turn away, and in a safe way, in a way that feels contained and held within the process and a guide. But it takes courage, and I think that's what I was trying to get at, is that we might not be living in the land of snows right now. We have comforts, we have basic comforts that Tibetans never had, or in India they didn't have in the early days. But what we don't have is that kind of community, family comforts. And so that's why it does feel like that our crux or koan is more of this inner dynamic, more self-love. There's a story Alan tells about, it was when there was a conference, you know, with the Dalai Lama many, many years ago, and Sylvia Boorstein, who's well known for teaching loving kindness, she's written a book on many books on loving kindness. She was talking to the Dalai Lama about teaching loving kindness to the West and how often it's hard for people to even feel loving kindness towards themselves. And that's the first step, is towards self. And I think it was Alan who was translating, because he tells the story too. Sylvia tells the story and Alan tells it because it's very interesting. He's also talked about this. The fact where this concept of self-hatred was totally foreign to the Dalai Lama. He didn't understand it. There wasn't even a word in Tibetan to translate it, because he couldn't fathom that somebody would have so much self-loathing and hatred generated towards themselves. It was common to think of it in terms of others. Oh, hatred towards others, resentment towards others. And so it was a moment where the Dalai Lama actually kind of got teary. He couldn't believe that this is something people do to themselves. And I remember Alan saying that he had to admit, he was having an interview with the Dalai Lama and he admitted, this is my biggest challenge, is my self-loathing, my self-hatred. Yeah. And so that's why that first step of Tonglen or loving kindness or equanimity or joy is always self. Work with the self first, then a neutral person, then a loved one, or vice versa, a loved one, then a neutral, and then a so-called enemy, and then the whole world. That's an intelligent progression And thank God for modern psychology and different methods where we can really start meeting people where we're at now, because the Buddhist thing is old, it's got a lot of wisdom, but it doesn't have all the tools to meet us. It has to change and grow, or else it's going to die and it won't be applicable, won't be a good antidote. So I'm all for whatever it takes to help feel that you can go to these places in safety, and also the somatics, like we were talking about, Mace and I were talking in the beginning, it's like your issues are in your tissues. So any kind of somatic experiencing or physical therapy that helps to go in and release the tension and the holding. I've done the Feeding Your Demons so many times with people where they're working with a headache, or they're working with self-hatred or anxiety or depression, and this chronic pain that has been coupled along with this emotional thing. At the end of the session, they're like, oh my God, I didn't even think about it, but my headache's gone, or my back ache is gone. And that's something interesting. We might actually be funding a study on Feeding Your Demons around chronic pain now. The results of our first pilot study were so good that the scientists, Philippe and Yves, but mainly Philippe, he has funding and he wants to go into different areas. He also wants to measure EEGs and hormone levels and cortisol. That's where the money is. Yeah, he's apparently plugged in. So,
May I ask a question?
yes, and then we'll come to a close.
I'm trying to wrap my mind around the idea that the Dalai Lama has enemies, has people who hate him.
Yeah.
Can you comment on that?
It just goes to show that everybody, no matter who you are, you're going to have enemies. I mean, the Chinese.
Yeah. What is
Not all of them. Let's be very careful. The government, we could be more specific about the power struggle there. It's more about land and resources and power. And so they want to control the Tibetan people, and they want to control him so that they can control the politics. And they say they hate him, but they're hating a cartoon character. If they knew him, they probably couldn't hate him as much. Oh yeah, but they've set up a whole false straw man there, and they're beating him up in order to try to manipulate and control. There are immense uranium resources in Tibet. It's scary, actually. They want to use the resources of not just uranium, but other minerals and metals. And also, if you look at the old map of Tibet, it was huge. Before 1959, Tibet was almost as big as China. And so they could see that strategically, if they could come in and take Tibet, then they would have more power and domination through the region up against India in particular. Yeah, so I think, why does anybody have enemies? It's complicated. But there's always ulterior motives there. They don't know him.
right?
He poses a threat.
He poses a threat.
A power threat.
So they said that they wanted to recognize the next Dalai Lama and name him. So he pulled a chess move and said, I'm not going to be reborn in Asia or in Tibet or China, and who knows, I might be reborn as a woman. But then he also stepped out of all political power, and he's just the religious leader. But the Tibetans stay very devoted to him. As long as they're devoted to the Dalai Lama, the Chinese can never take.
Just by virtue of that, he has enormous power.
He does.
By virtue of his attachment to
Yeah.
life ain't easy for anybody.
No. Okay, it's getting near our bedtime, I think. I hope you find this interesting. What?
It's not so soon.
Oh, good. Let's dedicate any positive energy first give some love to yourself. Dedicate it for yourself. May you heal. May you cultivate capacities within yourself to be with yourself when you need it. To go to the places that scare you, inner charnel ground, the time is right. And through that inner journey, through the darkness into the light, you become a beacon for others in your own creative way. Thank you. So I'll see you on the 16th of October. Eve will be here next week.
And I just want to remind folks about Donna and running the center on your donations, and we've got lots of really cool stuff coming up. So this is a little late, I won't go over it, but next weekend there's some cool workshops.
Yeah.
And there's new beautiful display, older flyer things up on the wall, and a calendar, and all that kind of good stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. I want to make a special plug for my dear friend Alejandra Soroka, who is coming to teach a workshop, or she just taught this past weekend, and she's doing more. I'm sure there are flyers up there. She's a really great teacher. She does work called Language Alchemy. It's about communication, and I highly recommend checking her out. Thanks, everybody. Good night. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yeah. What's your name?
Eric.
Eric.
Yes.
Yeah.
Have a good night.
You
And I
too.
really like your